The Maiden of the Forest, a Cinderella fanfiction by pumpkinmoose22. Chapter 1. It took every ounce of Kit's strength not to turn his horse around and ride after the fair maiden he had just conversed with. Her forwardness had intrigued him. The fact that she had not recognized him was astounding. But oh, how refreshing it was to actually be himself without having to keep up with protocols. True, he had danced around the truth. He hadn't outright said he was the prince, but she hadn't asked him if he was or not. She had simply asked for his name. In his eagerness and elation of having an opportunity to speak with someone who did not already know his identity, he had given it to her. As he directed his noble steed Tiberius back to Captain Alistair, he tried to keep and school his giddy feelings. But oh, how could he not wear his emotions on his sleeves? He hadn't felt this captivated since he was 12 and learning how to wield a sword. "Well, Mr. Kit," Captain Alistair chuckled slightly as Kit came to a halt beside him. "Would you care to explain what drove your attention away from the hunt?" Kit continued to grin despite the captain's slight dig at his name. Turning his head, he tried once more to get a glimpse of the girl with the golden hair. He could barely make her out, her figure disappearing into the thick cover of the trees. "Someone I hope to see again," he said faintly, his brain still foggy. Captain Alistair smiled a knowing smile, which Kit noticed before he was able to conceal it. "What?" Kit asked, his cheeks darkening ever so slightly. Before Captain Alistair could reply, the sound of the hunting horns ripped through the air. Kit started, and the voice of his enchanting woodland maiden seemed to ring in his ears. "Just because it's what's done doesn't mean it's what should be done." "Right again. Then you'll leave him alone?" "Stop the hunt!" Kit shouted, spurring Tiberius forward. "Your Highness?" Captain Alistair called after him, but Kit did not answer him. "Stop!" he cried again. The riders, hearing the command of their prince, came to a halt. Kit saw the stag in the distance, his big brown eyes wide with fright. "Your Highness?" one of the hunters questioned. Kit watched the stag a moment, the conversation with the girl replaying word for word throughout his mind. The magnificent creature before him appeared to be young and healthy. He did have the potential to live longer just yet. A dazzling smile crossed Kit's face. "Let's go," he said, twisting Tiberius around. "But, sire," a huntsman protested. Kit stared at the man questioningly. He immediately stilled. His fellow company was completely perplexed by his change in mind, but none dared to contradict him. If the prince decided against the hunt, he must have good reason. Though the kingdom of Aratus was small, it was large in heart. The reign of His Majesty King Rowan had been kind but firm, and the people had come to respect not only him, but the crowned prince as well. They led the affairs of the kingdom with their hearts, and their influence had rubbed off on the people. Thus they highly respected them in all decisions they made, for they knew it was made with careful consideration and justice. Kit, sensing that his men were perplexed but willing to obey, inclined his head slightly. "Thank you for indulging me, my friends. Come, let us return to the palace." Twisting around, he led the company back to the city, away from the thicket, away from his enchanting woodland maiden. "You do realize your return without the stag will cause quite a stir amongst a few individuals, sire," Captain Alistair commented once they reached the main road leading towards the royal city. Still euphoric from his chance encounter in the woods, Kit merely grinned and shrugged off his friend's concerns. "I will deal with that when the time comes, Alistair." He spoke silently, knowing that the Grand Duke was the captain spoke of. Kit made sure to wave jovially at the people as they passed, all of whom called out their adoration and respect. It didn't escape his notice as several young ladies patted their hair and smoothed their dresses before curtsying while batting their eyelashes. Kit had been taught to be polite to everyone, especially women. His late mother had drilled that into him for many years before her passing. She had been gone now for 5 years, having suffered from a tragic carriage incident. After her death, Kit and his father drew even closer than they were before, and tried to amplify everything they learned from her to keep it fresh in their memories. Remembering her teachings, he smiled kindly to the ladies, inclining his head. Several of them giggled happily. Captain Alistair chuckled softly beside him. "It would appear that your adoring fans are growing, your Royal Highness." Kit shook his head, focusing on the road. "I fear you are mistaken, Alistair. It is you who the ladies fret over. Captain Alistair laughed deeply. If His Highness says so. Reaching the palace, Kit dismounted his steed, handing the reins over to a stable boy. He smiled kindly at him before ascending the stairs, passing the silent guards who stood still as statues in their bright gold and blue uniforms. Passing the many elaborate halls and sporting countless tapestries and works of art from kings and queens long past, Kit headed for his room to change out of his riding clothes. His two manservants, Henry and Lance, were waiting for him. Both were young men of cheerful dispositions in their own respects, and had been in Kit's service since he was 10, although they were 3 years older than he. "Henry, Lance, how are you both?" Kit asked cheerfully. "Very well, your Highness," Lance said with a smile. "How was the hunt?" Henry asked, "Did you catch the stag?" Once more the image of the fair miss in the woods pranced through his mind, and a large smile lit up Kit's face. His manservants noticed this change in demeanour at once, and both shared a look of curiosity. The prince had not appeared this cheerful since he received a sword crafted from a neighbouring kingdom about a year ago. Kit walked into his room, Henry and Lance following closely behind. After Kit shrugged out of his jacket, he handed it to Henry. "I called off the hunt, actually," he admitted as Lance passed him a blue coat with a yellow cording swirling its way across the front, while Henry replaced the green riding jacket in the closet. "Whatever for?" Lance wondered while Kit sat down to exchange his riding boots for a pair of everyday wear. Kit's eyes sparkled. "For my own pleasure, I suppose." Henry and Lance shared another perplexed glance before Henry began cleaning off the prince's riding boots, while the latter fetched a small cape from the closet to match Kit's blue jacket. There was a knock on the door. "Come in." The door opened to reveal Captain Alistair. The coloured man instantly noticed that the prince was still in a state of euphoria. He had never seen him so head over heels for a girl. Trying to hide a small, pleased smile, he stepped into the room. Captain Alistair was 7 years older than Kit, but the two were undeniably the best of friends. Captain Alistair had been raised in the palace by his father, had been the captain before him. When Kit was born, Alistair was placed in his personal guardsman, and eventually reached the position of captain when his father died 6 years ago. Even though he had his duties, he and Kit remained side by side, supporting and watching out for each other in all circumstances. Kit considered Captain Alistair as the brother he had never had. "Alistair," Kit said, standing, "I would have thought you had other duties to attend to." "I do, but the king requested your presence." "He isn't upset about my decision concerning the hunt, is he?" "He did not seem enthused, but he also did not voice his thoughts to me concerning the matter," Captain Alistair answered. "The palace physician is currently examining him in his private chambers." Kit's euphoria faltered. His father's health had been declining since the beginning of the year, but he had hoped it would lighten in the wake of the summer. Thanking Henry and Lance, he left the room with Captain Alistair following closely in his wake. They passed several servants who each stopped to curtsy or bow. Kit tried to acknowledge them, but his focus was heavily pointing towards his father. His boots clicked loudly on the polished marble floor as he hastened into the room. "Father!" he called out the second he pushed the doors open. King Rowan looked up over the doctor's arm and raised an eyebrow. "Relax, Kit. I am not dead." Kit eyed him sheepishly as he crossed the room and sat down beside him. "My apologies." King Rowan chuckled a little. "You've read too much, boy. It makes me wonder how you'll behave once you are married and are expecting your first child. Your unease will surely distress your wife." Kit smiled a little, his mysterious maiden flashing through his thoughts at the word wife. "I suppose so." "Speaking of," King Rowan muttered delicately. The conversation of taking a bride had been on the king's mind since he had learned of his illness, but hadn't wanted to force the conversation. Until now. "I think it's high time you settle down, Kit." "Father," Kit replied kindly, "I know it is my duty, but—" "Kit, I am not young anymore," the king interrupted. "I had to see that you are not alone when the time comes for me to join your mother." "Surely that won't be for another few years," Kit muttered, his brow creased. King Rowan reached out and patted his son's arm. "Kit, you can't expect me to live forever." "I don't," Kit sighed. "Then you can't expect me to not say anything about your current status," the king continued. "Father, it isn't my wish to remain single." Kit assured. Then you have changed your mind about concerning the ball? The king said happily, thankful he didn't have to pull his son's arm into doing what was good for the sake of the kingdom. I have always believed it was a good idea, Kit muttered. Really? I believed he found the whole thing rather bothersome. Kit smiled slightly. I am just not a fan of having my portrait painted for the event. The portrait is necessary, Kit. It is the perfect way to entice eligible maidens to seek your hand. I think I may have a head start on that without the help of a painting, Kit said, his thoughts drifting once more to the girl in the woods. Oh? King Rowan prompted. I met someone today, Kit confided, leaning back a little while the doctor continued to examine his father. While you were out hunting, in the forest? His father asked sceptically. Kit nodded. Yes. Someone in our party laid eyes on the stag, and we were in pursuit, when I noticed a young lady in the woods. Her horse had taken off, and she seemed to be having difficulty getting him to stop. After helping her, the two of us conversed for a moment. He smiled, his memories playing before his mind. A smile lit up his face, his eyes twinkling. She was quite charming, father. I was very taken with her, and the fascinating viewpoints she presented. I could hardly think straight during the whole encounter. Kit, his father chided, you sound as if you are the first fellow to meet a pretty girl. Kit leapt to his feet, beginning to pace. She wasn't a pretty girl. Well, she was a pretty girl, but there was so much more to her. How much more? His father demanded as his eyes followed his pacing. You've only met her once. How could you know anything about her? You told me you knew right away when you met Mother. That's different. Your mother was a princess. You would have loved her anyway, Kit argued. I would not have seen her because it would not have been appropriate, he replied as Kit sat down next to him. And my father would have told me what I am telling you, and I would have listened. No, you wouldn't. Yes, I would. No, you wouldn't. Yes, I would. You wouldn't. You're right. Kit smiled in triumph, but it slowly slid from his face as he noticed the royal physician's distraught expression. Well, how is he? He asked hesitantly. The physician nodded. Your Majesty. He faltered into silence. A thick air of despair descended on the room faster than a cascading rainstorm. King Rowan let out a heavy sigh, staring off into the distance. Never mind. If it takes that long to work out a way to say it, I already know. Father, Kit muttered, reaching for his hand, his heart hurting. Way of all flesh, boy, King Rowan said. Slightly changing the subject, he stood. Come, we shall be late, and punctuality is the politeness of princes, Kit said at the same time as his father, smiling a little. Standing, he watched his father slip a crimson jacket over his shoulders. Kit was greatly dismayed by the doctor's unspoken news, but he tried his best to hide his feelings. Now wasn't the time to worry. His father obviously didn't want to talk about it anymore. Must I suffer through another setting of this portrait? He muttered as his father finished dressing. The king sighed. Kit, if we are to find you a suitable princess, we must make them aware of how dashing you are. How do we expect to have many prospects at the ball if we don't? Kit frowned. I don't believe I wish to marry someone who only desires me for my looks, father. The two walked out of the room. His Majesty the King, a herald announced, ending the current conversation. Captain Alistair and the Grand Duke waited in the hall, immediately bowed to both King Rowan and Kit before joining them in to walk into the room where Kit posed for the portrait for the upcoming ball. I am sure your father spoke to you of your behaviour in the forest, the Grand Duke suddenly put in as they walked. Kit scowled. Is it any of your business, Grand Duke? Your business is my business, your grace. It will not do to let the stag go free. Just because it is what's done, doesn't mean it's what should be done, Kit said, a smile suddenly climbing his cheeks at the words of his fair maiden haunted his mind again. Or something like that. The four men entered a large room surrounded by backdrops and a large canvas. A few servants and Master Phineas, the painter, stood waiting for them. Kit wasn't at all looking forward to having to sit there on the saddle with his sword held aloft. This was to be his 10th sitting with the painter. Make him look marriageable, Master Phineas, Rowan said exasperatedly. We must attract a suitable bride, even if he won't listen to a word I say. I shall endeavour to please, your Majesty, but I can't work miracles, the snarky painter replied. A splendid canvas, Master Phineas, Captain Alistair commented, while Kit climbed into the saddle and tried not to scowl. He hated having to sit through paintings. Thank you, as if he knows anything about art, Master Phineas muttered while handing Kit a sword. So this portrait will be sent abroad to induce the high and mighty to attend to this ball you insist on, Kit grumbled, not at all happy about his face being paraded around the kingdoms, unknown as a selling point for foreign royalty to desire him. Which is a tradition, the Grand Duke answered, which is beloved. In which you shall choose a bride, his father pressed, staring pointedly at the painter. A sigh escaped Master Phineas as he mumbled, fascinating, before heading over to start working on the canvas, which was almost complete. If I must wed, could I not wed, say, a good honest country girl? Kit asked impishly, unwilling to back down from his conviction. How many divisions would this good honest country girl provide us? The Grand Duke laughed. How will she make the kingdom stronger? We are a small kingdom amongst great states, your highness. And it is a dangerous world. King Rowan crossed across the room, approaching Kit. Listen, boy, he muttered quietly. I want to see you and the kingdom safe. Frowning, Kit considered him. He knew both the Grand Duke and his father were stubborn enough to think he needed to marry a princess, but maybe they would change their minds after meeting his Maiden of the Forest. There was only one problem, however. The girl he had met was not royalty, and therefore wouldn't attend the ball. Yet he had met her in the woods. Surely that meant she was a member of his kingdom. All right, father, on one condition. Let the invitations go to everyone, not just the nobility. King Rowan turned to the Grand Duke. What do you think? Would that please the people? Captain Alistair interjected his opinion before the Grand Duke could speak, for he could immediately see what Kit was up to. It is beyond my wit, your majesty, but I wouldn't mind a bit of a jolly, he said, chuckling. King Rowan laughed, and Kit smiled, catching Captain Alistair's eye. The captain nodded at him ever so slightly. The Grand Duke chuckled, clapping his hands together. I think we have made a bargain, he grinned. A ball for the people, and a princess for the prince. We'll just see about that, Kit thought silently to himself. He prayed that the girl from the woods would attend. He desperately wanted to see her again. He wished he had learned who she was. If he had been able to make sure she came. But alas, he had not gathered this information. In fact, she seemed hesitant to give him a name, which only enchanted him further. Who are you? He silently mused. Later, when night had descended and Kit was able to have the evening to himself, he wandered out to the grounds. He let out a heavy sigh, his thoughts straying for the 1000th time to the woods. Are you all right? I'm all right, but you've nearly frightened the life out of him. Who? The stag. What has he ever done to you that you should chase him about? Kit laughed. I must confess I have never met him before. He is a friend of yours? An acquaintance, she said with a smile as their horses circled each other. We met just now. I looked into his eyes and he looked into mine, and I just felt he had a great deal left to do with his life. That's all. Captivated by this young woman, Kit asked, Miss, what do they call you? Never mind what they call me, she said, averting her gaze. Kit frowned, looking around. You shouldn't be this deep in the forest alone. I am not alone. I am with you, Mr. What do they call you? Kit laughed. He couldn't help it. You don't know who I am. The girl's expression didn't change, and he realized she really had no idea she was conversing with the prince. Not wanting to embarrass her, he quickly said, That is, they call me Kit, or my father does, when he is in a good mood. They both lightly chuckled, and Kit couldn't help the way his heart leapt at her laugh. Where do you live, Mr. Kit? Not wanting to lie, he admitted, At the palace. My father is teaching me his trade. You're an apprentice, she said with an excited smile. Of a sort, he said evasively. That's very fine. Do they treat you well? Oh, better than I deserve, most likely. And you? She shook her head a little hesitantly, but answered, They treat me as well as they are able. Kit paused, as he noticed her beautiful brown eyes fill with unspeaken sorrow. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. What could have caused her such sadness? It's not your doing, she replied, trying to keep the sorrow out of her tone. that he could see in her eyes. "Nor yours either, I'll bet?" he prompted. She shed him a shy smile to hide her pain, and he had to admit she masked her feelings well. "It is not so very bad," she muttered. Others have it worse, I'm sure. We must simply have courage and be kind, mustn't we?" she said, her beautiful brown eyes filling with the emotion she spoke of. "Yes," he smiled. How curious that in one moment she was so full of sorrow, and yet the next strong enough to face him with a smile. "You're right. That's exactly how I feel." The hunting whistle blew, distracting them both. "Please don't let them hurt him," she pled, her large brown eyes staring into his soul. "But we're hunting, you see. It's what's done." "Just because it's what's done doesn't mean it's what should be done," she countered passionately. "Right again," he said, fairly impressed. "There you are!" Kit leapt out of his skin as he twisted around to find Captain Alistair, walking towards him. His friend set him a curious glare. "Something the matter, Kit?" He wondered, dropping the formal titles since the two were obviously alone. Kit sighed. "No, I was simply lost in thought." "Does this have anything to do with that girl in the forest?" Kit glanced at his friend and smiled. "Perhaps. I just can't stop thinking about her." "That much is quite obvious." Alistair paused to look over his shoulder. "The hour is getting late, you know. It wouldn't do for you to stand here on the grounds looking at nothing for hours. You'll give the servants quite a bit of gossip about." A small smirk graced Kit's lips. "I suppose you're right. We wouldn't want that, would we? Especially since you are supposed to be attempting to make a good impression, not only for the people, but for a future princess. We wouldn't want her having to hear about any strange rumours about you when she arrives, would we?" Kit rolled his eyes. "No, we wouldn't." Sighing, he turned around and headed back inside to retire for the evening. But his thoughts were just as full inside as they were out. All of them having to do with a beautiful young woman with long blonde hair, brown eyes, and a charming yet intriguing disposition that had captivated his soul like none other ever had before. End of chapter 1. Hi guys, hope you enjoy this. This is my ultimate favourite Cinderella fic. I've been trying to come up with my own version of Cinderella for my Classic Fairy Tales playlist, but I know so many versions of this story that I cannot think to come up with my own right now. I've even got my own that I imagine as a TV series rather than an audiobook. Anyway, remember to like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!